Chronicles of Narnia, The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. Chapter 14, The Bottom of the World. My name is Glog, said the Glum, and I'll tell you honest all I know. About an hour ago we were all going about our work, her work I should say, steady and silent and the same as we've done any other day for years and years. Then there came a great crash and a bang. As soon as they heard it, everyone says to himself, I haven't had a song or a dance or yet of a script for a long time. Why's that? And everyone thinks to himself, why, I must have been enchanted. And everyone says to himself, I'm blessed if I know anything on carrying this load, and I'm not going to carry it any further. That is that. And down we all throw our sacks and bundles and tools. Then everyone turns sees the great glow over yonder, and everyone says to himself, what's that? And everyone answers himself and says, there's a crack or a chasm split open, and a nice warm glow coming through it from the really deep land, 1,000 fathom under us. Great Scott! Exclaimed Eustace. Are there other lands still lower down? Oh yes, Honour, said Glug. Lovely places, what we call the land of Bisum. This country we are now, the witch country, which is what we call the shallow lands. It's a good deal too near the surface to suit us. Ugh, you might as almost well be living outside, on the surface itself. You see, we are all poor gnomes from Bisum, whom the witch has called up here by her magic to work for her. But we'd forgotten all about it till that crash came and the spell broke. We don't know who we were, what we belonged to. We couldn't do anything or think anything except what she put into our heads. And it was glum and gloomy and things she put in all those years. I've nearly forgotten how to make a joke or dance a jig, but the moment she banged and the chasm opened and the sea began rising, all came black. And of course we all set off as quick as we could to get down to the creek and the home to our own place. And you can see them over there, all letting off rockets and standing on their heads for joy. And I'll be very obliged to see your honours if you'll soon let me go and join in. I think it's simply splendid, said Joel. I'm so glad we feed the gnomes as well as ourselves when we cut off the witch's head, and I'm so glad they aren't really hard and gloomy any more than the prince really was. Well, what he seemed like. That's all very well, Poe, said Puddlegum cautiously, but those gnomes didn't look to me like chaps who were just running away. They looked more like military formations, if you ask me. Do you look to me like the face, Mr. Glog, and tell me you weren't preparing for battle? Of course we were, your honour, said Glog. You see, we didn't know the witch was dead. We thought she'd be watching us from the castle. We were trying to slip away without being seen. And then when you came out here with swords and horses, of course everyone says to himself, here it comes, not knowing that his honour wasn't on the witch's side. And we were determined to fight like anything rather than give up the hope of going back to Bisum. It'll be sworn 'tis an honest game, said the prince. Let go of it, friend Puddlegum. As for me, good Glog, I have been enchanted like you and your fellows, and have but newly remembered myself. And now one question more. Do you know the way to those new diggings, by which the sorceress meant to lead me out in my army against Overland? Yee, squeaked Glog. Yes, I know that terrible road. I will show you where it begins. There is no matter of use your honor asking me to go with you on it. I will die rather. Why? Asked Eustace anxiously. What's so dreadful about it? Too near the top, too near the outside, said Glog, shuddering. That was the worst thing the witch did to us. We were going to be let out into the open, on the outside of the world. There is no roof at all there, only a great horrible emptiness called the sky, and the diggings have gone so far that a few strokes of the pick would bring you out to it. I wouldn't dare go near them. Hurrah, now you're talking, cried Eustace, and Jill said, it's not horrid at all up there. We like it, we live there. I knew you overlanders lived there, said Glog, but I thought that was because you couldn't find your way down inside. You can't really like it, crawling about like flies on the top of the world. What about showing us the road at once? Said Puddlegum. In good hour, cried the prince. The whole party set out. The prince removed his charger, and Puddlegum climbed up behind Joel, and Golg led the way. As he went, he kept shouting the good news that the witch was dead, and that the 4 overlanders were not dangerous. And those who heard him shouted on to the others, so that in a few minutes the whole of Underland was ringing with shouts and cheers, and the gnomes by hundreds and thousands leaping, turning cartwheels, standing on their heads, playing leapfrog, and letting off huge crackers, came passing around to Callback and Snowflake. The prince had to tell the story of his own enchantment to deliverance at least 10 times. In this way they came to the edge of the chasm. It was about 1,000 feet long and perhaps 200 feet wide. They dismounted from their horses and came to the edge and looked down onto it. A strong heat smote up into their faces, mixed with smell that was quite unlike anything they had ever smelled. It was rich, sharp, exciting, and made you sneeze. The depth of the chasm was so bright that at first it dazzled your eyes and they could see nothing. When they got used to it, they thought they could make out a river of fire, and on the banks of that river it seemed to be filled with groves and unbeatable hot brilliance. They were dim compared to the river. There were blues, reds, greens, and whites all jumbled together. Very good stained glass window with the tropical sun staring through it at the midday might have something the same effect. Down the rugged sides of the chasm, looking black like flies against all that fiery light, hundreds of earthmen were climbing. "Your honours," said Gold, and when they turned to look at him they could see nothing but blackness for a few minutes, their eyes were so dazzled. "Your honours, why don't you come down into Bissum? You would be happier there than in that cold, unprotected, naked country out on the top. Or at least come down for a short visit." Joel took it for granted that none of the others would listen to such an idea for the moment. To her horror she heard the prince saying, "Truly, friend Golg, I have half a mind to come down with you for this marvellous adventure, and it may never may never have the chance again. And I know not how, as in my years past, I shall bear remember that it was once in my power to have probed the uttermost pit of earth, and I had forbore. What could a man live there? Do you not swim the fire river itself?" "Oh no, your honour, not we. It's only the salamanders that live in the fire itself." "What kind of beast is your salamander?" asked the prince. "It's hard to tell their kind, your honour," said the gold, "for they are too white hot to look at, but they are almost like small dragons. They speak to us out of the fire. They are wonderfully clever with their tongues, very witty and eloquent." Jill glanced hastily at Eustace. She felt sure that he would like the idea of sliding down that chasm even less than she did. Her heart sank as she saw his face was quite changed. He looked much more like the prince than like the old scrub at Experiment House, for all his adventures and the days when he had sailed with King Caspian were coming back to him. "Your Highness," he said, "if my old friend Rip Chip the Mouse were here, he would say that he could not now refuse the adventures of Bissum with a great impeachment to our honour." "Don't dare," said Golg. "I should show you real gold, real silver, real diamonds." "Bosh," said Jill rudely, "as if we didn't know that we blow the deepest mines even here." "Yes," said Golg, "I've heard of little suches and crusts that you top dwellers call mines. This is where you get dead gold, dead silver, dead gems. Down in Bissum we have them alive and growing. There I'll pick you bunches of rubies that you can eat and squeeze in a cupful of diamond juice. You wouldn't care about fingering the cold dead treasures of your shallow mines after you have tasted the live ones of Bisham." "My father went to the world's end," said Rian thoughtfully. "It would be a marvellous thing if his son went to the bottom of the world." "If your highness wanted to see your father while he is still alive, I think he'd prefer," said Puddlegum. "It's about time we were getting on that road to the diggings." "And I won't go down that hole, whatever anyone says," added Jill. "Why, if your honours are really to go back to the overworld," said Clog, "there's one bit of road that is rather lower than this, and perhaps if that flood's still rising—" "Oh, do, come on," begged Jill. "I fear it must be so," said the prince with a deep sigh, "but I have left half of my heart in the land of Bissum." "Please," begged Jill. "Where's the road?" said Puddlegum. "There are lamps all this way," said Cloak. "Your honour can see the beginning of the road on the far side of the chasm." "How long will the lamps burn for?" asked Puddlegum. At that moment a hissing, scorching voice like the voice of fire itself, they wandered towards it as if it would have been a salamander's, came whistling up out of the very depths of Bisham. "Quick, quick, quick, to the cliffs," it said. The rift closes, it closes. "Quick, quick!" At the same time, with ear-shattering cracks and creaks, the rocks moved. Already, while they looked, the chasm was narrower. From every side, belated gnomes were rushing into it. They could not wait to climb down to the rocks. They flung themselves headlong, and either because so a strong blast of hot air was beating up from the bottom, or for some other reason, they could have seen floating downwards like leaves. Thicker and thicker they floated, till their blackness almost blotted out the fiery river and the groves of the gems. "Goodbye to your honours, I'm off," shouted Glog, and dived. Only a few were left to follow him. The chasm was now broader than a stream. Now it was narrow as the split in a pillar box. Now it was only intensely bright thread. Then, with a shock like a thousand groans crashing into a thousand pairs of buffers, the lips of rock closed. The hot, maddening smell vanished. The travellers were alone in the underworld, which now looked blacker than before. Pale, dim, and dreary, the lamps marked the direction of the road. "Now," said Puddlegum, "it's 10 to 1 we've already stayed too long, but we may as well make a try. Those lamps will go out in 5 minutes, I shouldn't wonder." They urged the horses to a canter and thundered along the dusky road in fine style, but almost at once it began going downhill. They could have brought Golg and sent them the wrong way if they had not seen. and the other side of the valley, the lamps going on up towards the eye could reach, but at the bottom of the valley the lamp shone on moving water. "Haste!" cried the prince. They galloped down the slope. It would have been nasty enough at the bottom, even 5 minutes later, for the tide was running up the valley like a mill race. If it had come to swimming, the horses could hardly have won over. But it was still only a foot or two deep, and though it swished terribly around the horses' legs, they reached for the far side in safety. Then began the slow, weary march uphill, footing ahead to look at but the pale lamps which went up as far as the eye could reach. Then they looked back and they could see water spreading. All the hills of Underland were now islands, and it was only those islands that the lamps remained. Every moment some distant light vanished. Soon there would be total darkness everywhere except on the road they were following, and even on the lower part of it behind them, though no lamps had yet gone out, the lamplight shone on the water. They had good reason for hurrying. The horses could not go on forever without a rest. They halted. In silence you could hear the lapping of water. "I wonder what's his name?" Father Time. "Flooded out now," said Jill. "All those queer sleeping animals." "I don't think we're as high as that," said Eustace. "Don't you remember how we had to go down here to reach the Sunless Sea? I didn't think the water has reached Father Time's cave yet." "That as may be," said Puddlegum. "I'm more interested in the lamps on this road. They look a bit sickly, don't they?" "They always did," said Jill. "Ah," said Puddlegum, "but they're greener now." "You don't mean to say that you think they're going out?" said Eustace. "Well, however they work, you can't expect them to last forever, you know," replied the Marshal girl. "But don't let your spirits down, Scrub. I've got my eye on the water too, and I don't think it's rising as fast as it did." "Small comfort, friend," said the prince. "If we cannot find our way out, I cry you mercy all. I am to blame for my pride and fantasy which delayed us by the mouth of the land of Bism. Now let us ride on." During the hour or so that followed, Jill sometimes brought Puddlegum was right about the lamps, and sometimes it was only her imagination. Meanwhile the land was changing. The roof of Underland was so near that even by a dull light they could now see it quite distinctly, and the great rugged walls of Underland could be seen drawing closer and closer on each side. The road, in fact, was leading them up into a steep tunnel. They began to pass picks and shovels and barrels on the other side, and the diggers had recently been at work. If only one could be sure of getting out, all this was very cheering, but the thought of going into a hole that would get narrower and narrower and harder to turn back was very unpleasant. At last the roof was so low that Puddlegum and the prince knocked their heads against it. The party dismounted and led the horses. The road was uneven here, and no one had to pick one step with some care. That was how Jill noticed the growing darkness. There was no doubt about it now. The faces of the others looked strange and ghastly in the green glow. Then all at once she couldn't help it. Jill gave a little scream. One light, the next one ahead, went out altogether. The one behind them did the same. They were in absolute darkness. "Courage, friends," came Prince Rillian's voice. "Whether we live or die, Aslan will be our good lord." "That's right, sir," said Puddlegum's voice. "And you must always remember that there's one good thing about being trapped down here. It'll save funeral expenses." Jill held her tongue. "If you don't want other people to know how frightened you are, this is always a wise thing to do. Your voice gives you away." "We might as well go on and stand here," said Eustace. And when she heard the tremble in his voice, Jill knew how wise she'd been not to trust her own. Puddlegum and Eustace went first with their arms stretched out in front of them, for fear of blundering into anything. Jill and the prince followed, leading the horses. "I say," came Eustace's voice much later, "are my eyes going queer? Is there a patch of light up there?" Before anyone could answer him, Puddlegum yelled out, "Stop! I'm up against a dead end, and it's earth, not rock. What are you saying, Scrub?" "By the lion," said the prince. "Eustace is right. It's not daylight," said Joel. "It's only a cold blue sort of light." "Better than nothing, though," said Eustace. "Can we get up to it?" "It's not right overhead," said Puddlegum. "It's above us." "Well, but it's then this wall that I've run into. How could you be, Paul, if you got on my shoulders and saw whether you could get up to it?"